So welcome to our What is a Citizen Detective series. This is actually the third installment of this series. We're really excited. As an organization, Uncovered, we focus a lot in the opportunity to crowdsource information related to unsolved cases of the murdered and missing, and providing an opportunity for citizen detectives to fill in those gaps to help potentially solve, but definitely shine a light on the more than 200,000 unsolved cases of the murdered and missing that are out there. So we're really excited to curate an amazing community, work with wonderful content creators, and provide a platform for people to interact. So part of that is this series that we've recently started. So what will happen tonight is Jacob will kind of share his background, what led him to where he is now, his work as a citizen detective, really great research tools, tips, and some cases that he's also working on. So part of that is definitely him sharing information, but we want you to be able to ask questions, interact, pop in. Again, it's a small group because we want people to be able to have a conversation and feel included in it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jacob. Awesome.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Jacob Randall, and I'm the creator and host of Crime of Your Life, a true crime podcast, which is focused on unsolved cases, obscure criminal cases. It really started out more just unsolved, and I kind of opened up to the word obscure because sometimes I want to talk about concepts and not just missing people and unsolved murders. As a podcaster, I like to do something meaningful with what I'm doing. I'm sure that I'm not the only, if you've heard my podcast, I'm certain I'm not the only true crime podcast you've heard. But my background is really in performance theater and in the arts, and I didn't really get into true crime, I don't like to say true crime because I feel that's a genre versus criminal justice and investigations into criminal cases. But I didn't really become interested in crime in this way until the last few years. But I grew up in Van Buren, Arkansas. Currently, I live in Los Angeles, California, but I did grow up over in the Midwest in the South. And looking back in my life, long before I ever had any thought of doing anything like this, there was a really horrible crime that occurred in the town across from where I lived. And that is the unsolved abduction and murder of Melissa Witt, which on the next slide, if we switch over, this is Melissa Witt. She was abducted and murdered in late 1994. She was 19 years old at the time. And it happened in a bowling alley parking lot in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And like I said, that's just the town over from where I grew up. And, you know, like a lot of you, it's one of those things, I'm sure like a lot of you, it's one of those things that just has always stuck with me. And that's kind of the basis of my podcast, Crime of Your Life, is that we all have one of those crimes that's happened. Maybe it happened to us, or maybe it happened to someone we know or someone we don't know, but it happened in our town or to someone that we're not that far away from. But we all have one. And that's really where the idea for my podcast started. And so with my approach to the podcast, I'm looking into those cases, but I'm trying to come at it from a perspective that we're all affected by these things, even if it's not our family necessarily. The fact that these crimes are happening and they go unsolved for so long, they really have an effect on all of us as a whole. They certainly did with me as a whole. They certainly did with me because I ended up writing a narrative about it and forming a podcast about it. The purpose of the podcast and the episode that I did on the Melissa Witt case was to compile as much information as I could into a presentation that people would remember. Because my theory is that that's the best way to talk about these crimes, not to exploit them or anyone involved, but to lay them out in a way that's emotional, that gets to the heart. And I think that's where my background in performance and theater and storytelling kind of plays into the podcast thing. I just kind of thought to myself, you know, if I can put this into a story and make it and kind of reach people the way that it touches me, then hopefully that will bring more attention to it. I hadn't seen a lot of other podcasts or any other podcast talk about the Melissa Witt case in the way that I have. And other podcasts have talked about it. They've talked to people involved in the investigation, but I hadn't quite seen, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, I just hadn't seen for myself or heard for myself this case put into story form. And I really tried my best to get all of the facts as correct as I could. And I really tried to kind of present it in a way that made it about a mother who was looking for her daughter and came home and she wasn't there. And I tried to present what I thought were the main theories at the time of the case. And so for me, that was my contribution to this case. I didn't know what I was going to do next after it. And I certainly didn't think that it would lead me here. But since doing this first episode, it's changed the way that I do the podcast. It's changed my approach. And when I started it, you know, I didn't know anything about podcasting. I didn't know about audio. I didn't know, and it's not perfect. It doesn't sound perfect, but I do feel proud of it because it's a good presentation of this case and it gives some heart. And I just hadn't seen that. So, and I'll talk more about that. I might jump a little all over the place and go back and forth, but we'll go to the next slide just so I can keep some momentum. So I wanted to talk about some of my citizen detective tools. And the first one is the Carrot search engine. Then I'll go through social media, the Wayback Machine, and a few others. So that's okay. We can go ahead and look at the Carrot search. And so this is my favorite research tool. And it's because it's different than any others like Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever people use. Because the thing about the internet is that a lot of information kind of gets wiped away or it fades into this unreachable place. I think a lot of people, when they're Googling and they're looking for information on a missing persons case, they look for everything they can find through the Google search results, and they kind of just say, that's it. That's what's there. Or maybe they'll look at some kind of archive or something else, but I feel like it's really easy to hit a brick wall, especially if as a citizen detective or as a person who is interested in these cases, you really feel a little powerless if you're just a person on a computer and that's all you are. That's what it feels like, but you're much more than that. And tools like this can kind of show you that. This search engine, basically, if you go to the next slide, when I typed in Melissa Witt over at the top left here, it categorizes everything instantly. And it brings up results from everywhere, from all over the internet, and it puts them into all these different places. So immediately you can kind of see that there are 5 documents related to the full phrase murder of Melissa Missy Witt. And it's going to show you some irrelevant documents as well, but it puts it all in front of you instantly, and it changes the entire search from having to look through just this whole list of articles and go to the next page and go to the next page. And if you go over to the next slide, you can even look at it in like this tree form, and it lets you know how many documents are available related to your specific search. And my favorite thing about this is that I'll look at for information for a crime that has occurred, and I can't find anything further back than a certain year. But then if I go to this web search, this search engine, it'll show me things that I thought were just gone from the internet. I found an article from 2006 about a crime. I mean, 2006, that's a long time on the internet. I found an article there that I never would have found by doing just a regular Google search. And I don't know all the mechanics of how it works. I'm not, an expert on any of that. All I know is that a friend of mine told me about this experimental search engine, and I haven't stopped using it because it saves me time. It enables me to find things that I couldn't find before. It allows me to get a little more specific in my searches and look at things by category. So if you're the kind of person that spends a lot of time, Googling or searching on the web, it's really, really useful. I did share this with another podcaster, TZ Borden, who is the host of Tapes from the Dark Side, which is a really good podcast. And he's like the one podcaster who appreciated it, because I've shared it with other podcasters with the thought of, hey, we're trying to do research here and do the best we can, right? So I'm going to give you this tool. And not everybody's really found it that useful, but I do think that as a citizen detective, it's just great. It's just easy, and it kind of simplifies things and pulls things from places that you didn't think you could access. So if you go to the next slide, it just shows you that it puts it into pie chart form for you if you like that. I just highly recommend that you check out Carrot Search. If you Google Carrot Search, it's going to have a few different results, and just click on the one for the actual search engine. I did put the URL earlier in an earlier slide. So let's move on to the next slide here. I listed social media as a tool that I use for my research. And, why social media? Why? And that seems like such an obvious thing. And yet, really, why would you use Twitter and Facebook and Instagram? But I'll tell you why, because the case information that you're seeing on this slide is for a woman named Margie Ada Sneed. She went missing in 1974. And the information that you see in front of you is really it. Apart from a couple other things, like she was reported missing out of Hot Springs, Arkansas, which is a few hours where I'm from. But apart from that, there's really just a physical description. And I've been looking at places like the Charlie Project or the Doe Network for the last couple of years, and I've seen this case many times, and it's just this. It's nothing. You can't do anything with this information. And to tell you the truth, the date of birth right there, July 18th, 1954, that's only on there because of me. And so the question, why social media, the answer is on the next slide. This is why. Because I was looking for information on Margie Ada Sneed. I was so curious about why this person was reported missing from 1974, but there's no information, but the case is still active, or at least it's still available publicly. And if it's available publicly, that's an invitation to people that it needs to be solved, that it needs a resolution. So why social media? This is the answer why, because I was looking everywhere for information and I couldn't find any. And I finally went to Twitter and just typed in Margie Ada Sneed, and this one tweet came up from 2013. And I don't think it's a problem sharing the name of the Twitter handle, because it is public information. But Margie Ada Sneed, her case information is from 2017 on, or I'm sorry, excuse me, the last update was from 2017. But there isn't really any information on the internet. So finding this on Twitter told me something new. It told me that someone went to Facebook, because you can see a Facebook link there. Someone went to Facebook to talk about this person who was missing, and they did it in 2013 in July. It was shared by, nearly 4,000 people in less than a day. And it has another name with it, Margie Ada Sneed McCoy. And it says, son is seeking his mother. That tweet has, in some ways, more significant information than the page you just saw. Because now we have a little bit of a story. We have the fact that, hey, in 2013, presumably an adult male was looking for his mother, and her name is different here than it was in the databases that are across the web. So this alone opened up my world a little bit, because I look at this as a trace of information that was there before. This information was there before. You click on this Facebook link and it leads you to nowhere. It's a broken link. But clearly there was more information before now. There was something, and there was a person who cared about Margie Ada Sneed. And it really drove me to want to find out more information about this. So that's when I decided on my own that I would contact the Hot Springs Police Department. Well, actually, I went through the city clerk. I contacted the city clerk. I was trying to file a Freedom of Information Act request. And I can't speak to how that process really works, because the way they do it through this particular police department is that you make the request to the city clerk and then she handles the rest, which seems crazy to me. It seemed really too simple. But sure enough, after I inquired about this case along with a couple others, they sent me the police report from when this crime was actually reported, or from when this person was reported missing, and it was from 2013. And the report was made shortly before this tweet was sent out. And then it told me the name of the person who reported it. It was her son, Justin M. McCoy. And the crazy thing is that there was more information in that little report from the police than what's on the databases. And to me, that is so significant for what Uncovered is doing and what we're talking about right now with being a citizen detective. Because in this moment, just me, this regular person, no experience, just curious and just wanting to know more, I found out that there is more information. It exists, and it always did. It just isn't there for some reason. There's some kind of gray area between the person who reported their mother missing and that information being made available publicly. There's something lost in the middle there, a gray area. Because what I found on this police report is that Margie Ada Sneed was reported missing from 1974, and her son hired a private detective. Who was able to determine that Margie had sent a postcard to her family in 1974 from Hot Springs, Arkansas. And not only that, but in the background of the postcard was the Arlington Hotel, which is a famous hotel in Hot Springs, Arkansas. So immediately, just from this little thing, I know so much more. I know that Margie Ada Sneed had a family that cared about her, had a son that was looking for her as an adult. She was in touch with her parents. She probably wasn't from Arkansas if she's sending a postcard out of Hot Springs. There's so much more. And that was what led to me creating an episode about it. An episode out of nothing, a narrative, a story out of nothing. And now there is one. Now this person, Margie Ada Sneed, there is some kind of story. She's not just a picture with a name and a profile. She's a mother, a daughter. A son was looking for her. She's someone who communicated with her parents back in the 70s when she traveled. She was at the Arlington Hotel. There's so much more. And even though I'm not solving a case here, I've created something that allows someone else to come along and see a little bit more of a picture than what I had when I started. And same with the Melissa Witt case, I was trying to do that too, but in that case, there was so much more information. Same principle applies though to put together a narrative that allows other people to come along and react to it and then do something more. So if you want to go on to the next slide, I wanted to mention the Way Back Machine. I don't know if anyone uses it here or if you've heard of it, but maybe you probably have. I find it helpful to find information that's been kind of deleted from the internet, but someone took a screenshot of it and uploaded it to this archive. So I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but if you haven't been to the Way Back Machine as a research tool, it does help. Because really, I guess that's the whole revelation that I've had through podcasting and through looking at unsolved cases, is that it's not a simple matter of this crime was committed and law enforcement did everything they could to solve it and that's the end of it. You know, it's not that simple or you wouldn't be here. But it really is a revelation that I had, that there are a lot of pieces to these puzzles and they're just scattered everywhere. And something as simple as using social media. And actually, there's something I forgot to mention about social media, to just put a pause on it for a second. Another reason that social media is important, and I know I'm backtracking, is because it's also important to know what people are saying about these cases, cold cases especially, because that, when there is no information or when there is little information, that itself can become information. And what I mean by that is, just imagine the comments section if we could access that Facebook post for Margie Ada Sneed. There might be people who commented, hey, I remember I was in Hot Springs, Arkansas in the 1970s. I remember, she looks familiar. Or, hey, I heard about that case 10 years ago. You never know, because it's happened. I've looked for information on cases where I couldn't find anything. But then in the comments section from, 7 years ago, when someone brought it up online, you'll find that people will mention, hey, I remember where that location is, where that person was abducted. It's down the street from, or it used to be down the street from a truck stop that's no longer there, or just pieces that you wouldn't necessarily get otherwise. So I think people underestimate social media as a tool, because it is a place that saves a lot of stuff that we put on there. Not everything, but it does. So I just wanted to jump back to that really quick, but we'll go back, we'll go forward again. Like I said, the Way Back Machine, and now newspapers.com. I believe you have to pay for newspapers.com, and I'm not telling anyone that they should go pay. But if you're the kind of person who does want to pay a little bit, for me, I have a Patreon. I am trying to pull in a little bit of money with my podcasts, because I want to be able to do more with it and expand. And because I have a few patrons, it's enabled me to get a newspaper.com account. Again, I'm not saying that you should go spend money to do it, but it is a useful tool. However, something neat is that sometimes through Carrot Search, you'll find things from newspaper.com that have somehow kind of been posted or translated over. So it's something to keep in mind as an additional tool. I think it's really useful, and it's an individual choice, of course, if you want to invest in using it. I don't spend a lot of money otherwise, but I did want to point to that. And I guess the next slide, we'll take a look here at the Brave browser, which is free. This is not necessarily completely related to finding information about missing persons cases or unsolved crimes, but we all have our ways of using the internet. And if you are using the internet a lot, like I am, and if you're searching a lot, you're bound to be generating some hacking situations or some kind of vulnerabilities over time. It's really easy to make that happen if you spend a lot of time on the internet. So the Brave browser, I've been using it since it was in its demo stage, and it's just a fast browser, and it's private, and it blocks ads and trackers. So I save time using it. I'm notified when nefarious things are happening as I'm doing a web search. And I'm able to block a lot of things that I don't want to see or I don't want my computer to intercept. It's free. You can use it for your phone, for your desktop and other devices. And it's another one of those tools where I haven't really been able to convince too many people to use it, but I'm just like, if you could just listen to me, you won't regret it. And so I wanted to just share that because it's helped me a lot, especially when I'm up late at night looking through cases and I just want a fast browser, and I'm, you know, I do a lot of web searching, so I'm always afraid that I'm gonna get phished or whatever they call it. I don't want to say like hacking terms that I don't know, but anyway, so that's a really important tool. And then on the next slide, I wanted to say that we all have a secret power, and it is a tool. And, you know, if I'm being honest, I don't know where everybody's coming from when it comes to being a citizen detective or being involved with Uncovered or anything. All I know is that I'm probably a lot like many of you. I care about what I'm doing. I care about these cases. I got into podcasting because, yes, I'm a creative person, I'm an artistic person, and I'm a storyteller, but I can't tell stories about things that I don't care about and that don't mean a lot to me. The Melissa Witt case, she was abducted in 1994 and she was murdered, and it's still unsolved. It happened not far from where I'm from. And I've just never been able to stop thinking about it. And when I got to this point in my life where I am now, where I decided that I'm going to use my creative background, but I'm going to use it in a way that makes sense for me, and I'm going to use it for something that I care about and that I'm passionate about. I mean, that's really how I got into podcasting and all of this, is because I recognize that my superpower is podcasting and storytelling. And everybody, I think, has a superpower of some kind in this situation. So I'm just trying to tell you that you don't have to make a podcast. You don't have to do something that is about that has the level, has like a star level to it, where, you know, I'm the host of a show. You know, I'm the host of a show. I'm telling a story. There are people that are listening for enjoyment and entertainment. You don't have to do anything like that, though. You don't have to be out front like that to do something meaningful and to contribute. That's just the way I know how to do it. But everybody has a different way. You hear who have formed this group with Uncovered. There are a lot of super secret powers involved. You know, there's a lot there, and everybody has that. Whether you're a researcher or you're good at noticing patterns, or maybe you're good at talking to people, and that's the thing that you're best at, is reaching out to people and stepping out of your comfort zone, because that's part of it too. And that's really what I just want to say to people, is that we all have a different secret power, a secret superpower, and we can all contribute in a different way. And that's what I have tried to do with my podcast, with the Melissa Witt case and with other cases. I try to shed light on missing people and unsolved murders and abductions, and I try to create narratives where there are none. I tried to bring heart and humanity to the different cases, and it's really, it's different for everybody how they contribute. Everybody has their own way. So let's look at the next slides, because speaking of how I'm still going to be contributing, I have some other cases that I'm working on. And this is one of them. This is David Allen Lamb, who went missing out of Danville, Arkansas in 1995. And this is just like the Margie Ada Sneed case that I just talked about. This is the information. This is what we've been given to go solve the case, to go help. And I'm just not convinced that when someone reported David Allen Lamb missing, that this is all they had to say. I don't believe that. And I know it's not true. And I know that from my own experience. And so, I mean, what can you do with this? You can't do anything with this. But I am going to try. So it is one that I'm going to look into, and that I've already started on, and we'll see what happens. But I wanted to switch over to the next slide really quick. This one is Serenity Lachey Hosey, and this is a 13-year-old girl who went missing out of Hot Springs last year during the pandemic. This is all of the information, and it's really hard for me to fathom. I know for a fact that this cannot be all that there is. I spoke about this case in one of my episodes called Missing Details of the Missing, and that is what that episode is about, is how we have all these missing people and there are just missing details. So it's another case that I'm still looking into and I want more information on, and it was recent. So I feel like the information should come quickly, but interestingly, the Hot Springs Police Department hasn't gotten back to me on this one. They haven't said anything since. They were happy to send me the thing about Margie Ada Sneed from 1974, but this one and a couple of other recent cases, they didn't send me any information on. It kind of, I don't like to be an alarmist, but it kind of troubles me because there are a lot of cases happening in Arkansas right now, missing people. I keep seeing it on Facebook, the Hot Springs Police Department or the Springdale Police Department, which is a few hours away, reporting people missing. A lot of times it's young people. And I'll look in the comments, and other people are noticing too on these Facebook posts. They're saying, what is going on in Arkansas? What is happening in Arkansas? Is anyone else seeing all these kids going missing? And I haven't really expressed these thoughts to anyone yet because I'm working on an episode about it. But I mean, to sum it up, I love what I'm doing with the podcasting thing, but I didn't think that it was going to lead me to this place to where I was going to discover that I could have some kind of impact. Because with the Margie Ada Sneed case, I know I keep jumping around, so forgive me, but with the Margie Ada Sneed case, the information I was able to uncover in that, I actually sent to these databases and they updated their profiles. Very small impact, but it's something. It's much more than what was there for the last few years. So I feel like I've kind of gone through everything all over the place, and maybe I've missed some things, maybe I haven't, but I'm pumped to keep talking and answer any questions. Or is there another slide here? I can't even remember. Let's take
I think we hit the end. Look at it. We did that.
Beautiful. That is a beautiful slide.
Jacob, first of all, goosebumps listening to you talk. But just the information that you're sharing, especially your impact in these cases and what your role could be. I would just like to hear from other people. I mean, and I know, Dana, I'm seeing you smile throughout this whole thing because I know that this hits every one of your buttons. What do you feel like from a contributing spot of, I love this notion of this is your medium. This is what you know that you're good at. So how you can contribute. But even that idea of like, you updated that birthday, you did that. That's a tangible thing that then someone else can maybe take and run with, that will open up other opportunities, or at the very least, someone is still talking about this case. That's just so impactful.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because the description with Margie Ada Sneed before before I looked into the case, it wasn't even consistent across databases. You would see her weight listed as different between different uh, databases and profiles. And when I was writing the narrative, I was trying to think to myself, is that important for me to, 135 pounds here or 130 pounds and then versus 150? Is that really that important? And of course it is, because we don't have any other information. So the fact that it was inconsistent across those databases was confusing to me. And I was thinking, what if she turns up in a photograph from the 1970s, and it's the difference between determining if she's a doppelganger or not, because she's a little bit thinner than what you thought. It matters. And so just in covering that alone, yeah, a small impact, but to me, it means something. When there's no information, every little bit matters.
Yeah. So I open it up. I'd love for us to just kind of have a conversation of just what Jacob has kind of talked about, his process, but also that notion of just the next little thing and being able to kind of connect. Again, I know, Dana, that you're a big proponent of that and the work that you're doing, but also, Andrea, I know even with what you're covering with the crime sheet too, of just being able to provide information and keep these stories in front of people and remind people that it's not just entertainment. But we talk about this a lot as a team of, this isn't for everyone. This genre, we know, is not for everyone. But part of the tax, I think, of consuming true crime is you take that on. Now you have to do something good with it. So if it is even something small or something big, it's on you to, you've taken that in, and now you need to do something good with the information that you have. Even sharing that case with someone else and telling someone who's not even heard about the case of, you should know about this, you should know about this person. But I would be interested to hear other people's insights, thoughts.
I just want to compliment Jacob, because it did not feel like it was all over the place. And this is exactly the kind of information that I came to uncover to learn, especially, opening the eyes about, just because something happened in 1974 doesn't mean there isn't something and you can't find anything if you Google it, doesn't mean there isn't something out there that references the information. So I found that to be very helpful. So I really appreciate your time, and also the Uncovered folks for pulling together the community.
Thank you, Lenora,
for saying that. You're absolutely right, though. The information, it's crazy to me, because I just didn't think that was how the internet worked. I just didn't think that things would get lost over time. I just thought once it's there, it's there. And but that's the thing too. A lot of what we're looking for isn't even on the internet. A lot of the information isn't there at all. And I think that people don't realize that we really only know what's been placed in front of us, and there is so much more to figure out. And with true crime and podcasting and all of that, yeah, that's something that I think is missing in the approach of a lot of people, is that they're not necessarily trying to do anything good with it. And not just podcasters, but did you hear there's a new Ted Bundy movie coming? It's so exciting, right? So thank you for recognizing that I'm trying to do something good.
Well, in the interest in sharing, when I went to CrowdSolve in Chicago, that was going to be an interesting thing for me, because I've always been interested in crime. And right away, you see the family and what they're experiencing. And I've researched a couple of the cases on the Uncovered website. And once you really get into the perspective of the family, it's an entirely different experience. And you realize how much they need people like us, because the more the word gets out, the more the possibility that some information is going to come forward. And back in the day, families didn't have the opportunity that they have now. And it gets to one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and then I'll be quiet and stop hogging the question time. One of the things that I was thinking about as I've gone through these couple of cases, and with CrowdSolve, we had all that great information from law enforcement. And when you do one of these, and that was the first case I ever worked on, when you do one of these without it, you realize what you're lacking. It occurred to me that if you are a podcaster, which I actually have no desire to be, but if you are, you are more likely to be able to get some of the people that were involved in the case to talk to you, friends of the victim or something, if you track them down, or I'm assuming that you can. And so I'm wondering, are there ways that those of us that aren't in that role might be able to get additional information that's not on the internet, but is in people's heads?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, that's a great question. I agree that I've seen that too. Like if you're a podcaster, sometimes people will be more willing to speak to you because I think people recognize, and more people now than ever starting to recognize that that's a way to get the story out. Mm-hmm. I've noticed a lot on Twitter, I'll see people who are almost looking for a podcast to talk about their missing loved one or something like that. But if you're not a podcaster and you still want to engage with those people, how do you get them to talk to you? How do you do it? I mean, one way is by doing this, what we're doing here. This is a new tool. This is, to me, as powerful or more powerful, really more powerful than a podcast in and of itself. But kind of, I think, affiliation with something that appears to be official or that appears to have a good intention is a good place to start. So being forthcoming about who you are and what you're doing is one way. If you contact someone and I'm this person and and that's kind of a thing too. I had to reach out as a podcaster to the city clerk in Hot Springs, trying to get information, and that was weird because I don't know what they really think of podcasters or why they think I have a right to do anything. And I think that points to the difference between reaching out to like bureaucratic officials versus family, because I think family are probably more understanding. But I almost felt like I was a thorn in the side of the bureaucracy for a moment there. The city clerk was very helpful, but the police, they didn't even say anything in their email to me when they sent me this information. They just sent me a blank email with an attachment of a police report. And I don't blame them because they're probably like, who's this guy? What right does he have to ask for this information? I don't blame them, but, I do have a right because they put these missing persons profiles on the internet. They are the ones that are not able to solve them for whatever reason. So they're inviting all of us to try and do it. So I don't like that attitude when it comes from the bureaucracy. But when it comes to family, I know this is a long answer. When it comes to family, I mean, I don't have the exact formula, but I think it's about doing what's at the heart of what is at this organization. What I see in this group is structure. I see a clear purpose, and I see empathy. And I think that when you reach out to people and you can present that and be clear about it, I think that makes all the difference. And having a link, being able to link to your organization or to the work you've already done is really, really helpful. Because I can't imagine as a podcaster, me personally reaching out to, I think I could reach out directly to a family member, but I would feel more confident doing it through this organization than I would through podcasting. And that speaks to sort of my issues with podcasting with true crime and the genre, if that makes sense. So long answer, to sum it up, I think you've got one of the tools right in front of you. It's a matter about being forthcoming and being clear about what you want. So that's a place to start. I'd be curious if anyone else has any thoughts on that or any perspective on that. But if you don't, that's okay too. So.
Hey, so I just want to first say that I've really enjoyed listening to you. I can't agree more with the things that you've said about podcasting and just pulling little pieces together and maybe not solving a case, but being able to provide more information to the public than has been available in the past. That's really my goal with True Crime PI. I just want to find just that one little piece of information that I can share that maybe hasn't been shared, that might actually lead to the case being solved one day, or the growth of the case and information to solve the case. So I love that that's your goal as well. And all of the resources you shared were fantastic. So thank you for that. But reaching out to families, I feel I'm not real comfortable doing that. And I think that we have to be super careful. If they reach out to me, that's one thing. Because they'll, if they see that I put up a post about the case, or if I comment on something on Facebook, then they might come back and say, oh, I'd love to talk to you about the case. And then I feel like that's an open invitation. So it's not like I'm sort of walking into their world, they're coming to my world. And that's the only way I feel really comfortable doing that. And as far as I think that where I always start is with contacting the detective or the police, department, or asking for the, doing a FOIA request and hoping they'll at least give me the initial incident report or the first page of that, because they're not usually willing to give everything when it's a cold but it's open or active case. So really, I mean, it's like even now sometimes I get really nervous whenever I'm making that phone call. I'm just like, hey, hi, I'm Dana Pohl. I have a true crime podcast and I'm doing some research on this case. And, I feel like I over explain myself, but in some cases, some of these people are really willing to talk with you, and they seem like they're excited that someone's interested in one of their cold cases. And like you said, Jacob, some of them are just like, yeah, whatever, fill out this form, send it to me, so you don't always get a warm, fuzzy feeling. But my thing is that as long as I get some new information that I can include, I'm excited about that. So that's really the tidbit that I have, is just to, you have to kind of put yourself in an uncomfortable situation and reach out to the departments. The Sneed case, I have looked at that so many times, and so many cases are like that where there's just no information and it boggles your mind. You absolutely look at it and you're like, how could that be the only thing they can tell you? Like, what was she wearing? Did she wear jewelry? There's nothing sometimes. And you just, that's why I feel super compelled to call the police department and just see what they'll share with me. And of course, searching NamUs, sometimes there's more in NamUs than there is, other places. But really, Charlie Project and Doe Network everybody's sort of on the same page these days. So you're not really getting any new information there. But, it really is, I think the key is to reach out to the departments.
Yeah, I like that. First of all, I like your podcast a lot, by the way. So I've heard some of it. I haven't heard as much as I want, because you know how it is when you do a podcast. But can't listen to that many because you're always working on your own.
Right.
But yeah, I love that you have just been able to reach out that way, and more bold than I have been, but that's really empowering to hear. Because like you said, sometimes, yeah, you'll come across someone who really is excited. The city clerk was really, really excited to help me. And that was so encouraging. And it was such a contrast to the email from the police department. I was kind of like a little confused by it. And then when I wanted more information from other cases, I think that their response sort of killed the momentum a little bit. I haven't heard back from them, but I like that you just call them up and tell them who you are. It's getting out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's what a lot of us do. We have to do. But if you don't have a podcast, get behind something that does make you feel a little stronger, some kind of shield, because at least with the podcast I can say that's my reason, because I have a podcast, and I want to uncover more information. But if I don't have a podcast, I can say, well, I'm a citizen detective, I'm with this organization, or what have you. So I think that but what you talked about was a really important point, was to just kind of get out of your comfort zone, because the worst they can do is say no or not respond. That's the worst that's going to happen. So, and you never know what good thing will happen, like with the Margie Ada Sneed case. And yeah, I do think we have that in common. I know that I may never, statistically, me, the podcaster, is unlikely to solve a case on my own. It's happened, but it's unlikely. But wow, I mean, there's no limit, I feel like, to how many cases you, all of us can create new narratives about and generate attention for, and you have no idea what's going to happen. So that's something that's exciting to me, and one reason I'm really excited to be involved with Uncovered.
I ditto that. Absolutely. I mean, there are so many ways that you don't have to be a podcaster. Uncovered is making it easy for citizen detectives or people that are just interested who may not think they're a citizen detective as of yet, but to come together to talk about these cases, to do research. And I mean, it's just as easy for me to find a date or a discrepancy or a piece of missing information as it is for anyone else. So, and I commend you for calling them and having that information added. I think that that's something that I've seen in listservs where people have said, oh, I found this piece of information, and someone will say, did you share it? Did you let them know? And they're like, no. And then everybody's like, share it right now. So yeah. So I mean, I think that's what's cool about this environment, is where we all come together to work together for the same mission, the same goal. And I can't be more excited to work with Uncovered and to know that this resource is available for whomever is interested in using it.
Agreed. It's very exciting. We just never know what we're gonna uncover, and no pun intended. But yeah, I think that if we can really make a difference if we work together. I never knew that this one person, could make any kind of impact. So I am fully convinced, though, that working with other people, the impact can be much larger and far-reaching, for sure.
And I have another shout out to Uncovered is the website is so respectable and credible, and it's and very professional. And anybody that goes to check it out because they're wondering what this organization is, and should I talk to this person, we'll see that.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's honestly, and let me give you some perspective, and let me know if we run out of time or something like that.
I mean, we love this. Keep talking about all this great feedback.
Yeah, let's this is good.
Yeah, I mean, let me tell you how exciting it is to me, because that part of now that the presentation part's over, part of really the podcasting thing and true crime, it's really hard. Or it should be. I think it should be hard, and it's a lot easier for some people than I could have ever imagined, and that boggles my mind. I don't want to cast out any judgments, but I feel when we're talking about horrible things, whether it's a murder or a missing person, they're human lives that we're talking about. We're talking about people, and it's difficult. When I was talking about the Melissa Witt case, when I was writing my narrative, you know, I'm not a brilliant writer or anything, or I'm not trying to undercut myself. I'm just saying I don't think of myself that way. I was just trying to do the best I could. But it took me months and months and months to write it. Just a 30-minute narrative. It took me so long to write it because I had to grapple with the fact that I'm talking about the life and death of a real human being, and it's someone who lived in the town next to mine. And when I got to the part where I'm talking about the murder, her body being discovered and going through the condition of the body, that was so incredibly difficult. And I just sort of did it as respectfully as I could without going into the unnecessary details. And not that there were way too many graphic details anyway, but in other cases, there have been more graphic details, and just it's really hard to talk about those things. And it's really made me realize what my contribution should be and what I want to do when it comes to crime, true crime, all of that. I do want to tell stories about cases, but I want to do things that make a difference, and I want to do things that matter. And I don't want to just listen to this horrible murder and how horrible it is, and I'm going to line up 10 episodes about it, or 10 different murders, and you can just binge all of them and it's horrible. There's nothing wrong with binging podcasts, but you know, we have to do something positive and meaningful if we're going to be here and do it. We can't let the real efforts of citizen detectives and people who care about these cases be overshadowed by the spectacle of did you hear this really screwed up crime and how awful it was? We can't let it be we just can't let our purpose be overshadowed by all of that. So that affects what I listen to as a listener of podcasts, and it affects how I make my podcast. Every episode, I'm trying to do something important, or that I think is important, or ask a question that I think is important. You know, the Margie Ada Sneed episode, that is not just about a woman going missing. It's about the fact that there was no information there, but there used to be, and that it mattered to someone, and that the information's gone. It's about the fact that the information's gone. It's not just about the case and about the person who disappeared. At the heart of it, of course it is, but so that I'm trying to think about concepts and ask questions and ideas. So to my point with Uncovered, this is the kind of thing I like to see. This is the kind of thing I'm drawn to, and that I'm looking for is something that is trying to do something good and make a difference in a way that empowers other people to do it. Because this is not about forming a private club and keeping all the information to one person, and that this is the opposite. This is about bringing in as many people as possible and sharing the information across the board in the ways that we get it. That's what we need. We need more. Just like when you see a profile for a missing person, we need more. We don't need power structures to hold all of the information and then just give us what they think we can handle, and yet still put out this expectation that we're supposed to help them. And there's just a lot there. There's a lot to think about there when it comes to all of these profiles that we're coming across, and there's no information. So no, that's a long tangent, but basically I'm just saying that Uncovered is one of those places that is emblematic of where true crime, where being a citizen detective, where all of this should go, because there is something happening right now. There's a great influx of people who are getting into true crime and podcasting and listening and all of this stuff. And we're here, so we get to decide. We at least get a voice here on where some of this goes as a society. And so I'm really just really proud of what everyone's doing here, and so grateful that you've involved me, very, very excited about it.
It's you know, what you're saying is kind of interesting, and I think Rachel may be able to relate to this. Is sometimes people get into things for the wrong reasons, and even in we're not this community, but the larger community of people that are interested in some of these things. Sometimes it is for the wrong reasons. But what you said, Jacob, about keeping the information kind of secret or in the club, one of the cases that I was working on, there happens to be a documentary filmmaker who is doing something related to the case. And this person lived in the area where it happened, and so may have gotten a lot of insights. And as I was completing the case, I contacted the person and I said, look, I'm citizen detective with Uncovered. And, I meant, they gave the web address. I said, is there any additional information that's not yet public that you could tell me? And I kind of thought that I would get the answer that I got, which was, can't share it right now because, and I specifically asked, well, when is the film going to be done? Well, we're still in the cutting phases, blah, 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 blah. And so it was expected, but it was also disappointing as well, because we're actually on the same mission, if that person's mission really is to help the family get the answers they're looking for.
Yeah, I hate to hear that. That's not surprising though, because people really do take ownership over these cases. And I think that's something to keep in mind when we're doing this, is being able to suss out if anyone really has ownership over a case. It's very different when you're talking about a missing person or someone and there's a family behind it. Jennifer Kessie out of Florida, her family, they've really taken the investigation into their own hands they've done it for a long time. There's nothing confusing or ambiguous about that. That the family, they're the heads of that. They do own the case, really. But not every case has ownership behind it. And some people will claim they do when they don't. And I think that's important to look at when you're interacting with people about these cases is does this person have any kind of real ownership? If someone's a documentary filmmaker and they're not sharing their information on a case, I hate to say that. I don't want to accuse people of having, less than good intentions or something, but their heart isn't where my heart is. Because for me, the moment I find the information, of course, I want to put it in my podcast, but I'm also telling you in the podcast where I've sent this information. I've sent it to these databases. I'm putting it out there. That's the whole point. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's something to really consider is when it comes to ownership over a case. And I don't want to get controversial, but part of me wants to be the person who says, hey, that person has the information, that person knows more, but they won't tell. Why?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it has something to do with, and not that it's wrong, but the people that really want to be the ones to solve the case. I was telling somebody that's not a true crime person about this stuff, and I said, but to me, it doesn't matter if I solve specifically am the one that solves the case. That's not a benefit that I'm seeking at all, actually. And maybe it's the ones that for whom that feels more important to them, that they tend to want to keep things more in their own realm, let's say.
Yeah, it's nice to see the like-mindedness of the people in this group. It's like you kind of find your people a little bit, and I've found that with a couple other podcasters, but it's hard. I had one podcaster, a friend of mine actually, who I admire very much. His podcast, every episode is Casey Anthony, who BTK, mm-hmm. and solved crimes, or Amanda Knox. And if it's unsolved, it's still one of those names that I don't think he's done done any unsolved cases, but he was talking to me about downloads and how many people I can get to download my podcast. And he was telling me, you just need to sell out and just do a really popular case and it'll get you so many more downloads. And, I know that he's a good person. But it was just so the opposite of what I'm ever going to do. And it really illustrates the difference in people and thinking. There are people who are very serious about this, who want to do something good. And then I think there are some people that have maybe convinced themselves that they want to do something good, and that they're doing something good. And that it's important to understand the difference, especially as you get out into interacting more with the Twitterverse or the internet and people. You don't want to get caught up in a situation where you've tethered yourself or your information to someone who, their intention is to get more downloads and to get more attention for their podcast. So I think that's something that all of us are probably going to come across more and more just throughout time when we're trying to find out more about a case or trying to find out more information. So it's just something to be aware of, that case ownership and just the perspective and the approach that and the intentions that other people have when they're talking about crime.
That's a really good point. I want to touch on that about your friend who was talking about downloads and covering cases that are maybe more salacious or more people are familiar with. We talk a lot about that. And part of building Uncovered and focusing on the notion of collective impact was because so many of those cases already get coverage. There's the 999,000 other cases that don't. So utilizing all of these small little steps that collectively will have a much bigger wave of impact in our mind will help those other cases that you don't hear about. So we'll never feature John Bonet on our site. It's still an unsolved case, but that's got so much coverage that already has its own zeitgeist around it. And not to say that it doesn't deserve to be solved, but there are so many other cases very similar to that where the demographics are very different, but no one ever hears about it. It's in a different location, or it just never got the same attention in the community, in the media, and frankly, in the justice system, that we want to make sure that we can step in and provide that. So that's where we think all of these smaller ripples will have a bigger wave. So focusing on those cases that don't get as much attention, but we do know that it will take all of us to do that, or you could cut to the front and cover some of those other cases and build up. But to your point, are you pulling in the people who want to help, or do they just want to listen, or do they just want to sit and consume? And we want to make sure that people on this journey, people who are supporting this, people who are here, want to have some sort of part of something much bigger than themselves, because we truly think that we can do that.
Yeah, that's what I see here. And I think that the more that we work together, we'll uncover information that we never could have imagined, and we'll probably uncover cases that are just not on our radar at all. Because that happens a lot. I'll come across something about a case that you don't even know the person exists, much less that they're missing. Things that never even make it to the internet. And it's such a big question mark, like who decides what gets the attention and what gets, pumped out there. And, if you really want to break it down, it has to do with money and class and power structures and all those kinds of things. And if you recognize that, then you know that there are so many missing people because of, where they live or what they look like, or how much money they have with their family. There's so many factors that keep them invisible. And so I think that's more of what we'll uncover through our efforts here.
Yeah.
I keep saying uncover, but I'm not.
I love it. You are so on brand tonight.
I'm not even doing it in that way on purpose.
I think he deserves a t-shirt.
Oh, he does. He does.
We're perfect branding. See?
Right. Well, we are about 15 over. I don't want to cut the conversation short because I think that this is great, but I just want to be mindful of the time. And I want to call to what our next iteration of what we're working on. You all have been here. Most of you have been here definitely from the jump, particularly in the community. But we are going to be announcing next week, we're launching a crowd fund to be able to build the next part of what we're hoping to do with Uncovered, which will touch a lot on the data components, more of the product, so we can provide more resources, more capacity, more connections. So not just the focus within collective impact, which is crucial and is at the heart of what we're doing, but that opportunity to bring in more resources to be able to connect from a data perspective. Just imagine what we can connect that way. So then we can see all of these cases outlaid, all of the connections that are making, not just from the conversations we're having and what we're able to visualize on the case, but then looking at them from a mapped structure and taking that data and overlaying it, see what other opportunities there are. So I do want to take a minute to kind of have Anna kind of come in and share a little bit, because we have something that we have loosely launched on the site, but we're really excited to talk about what the next iteration of that's going to be, and then answer any other questions you have. But again, definitely continue the conversation.
You want me to go ahead and walk through it? Sorry, my internet connection is unstable. All of a sudden, it's been perfect the whole time, and now it's decided to.
I had the same thing. It was like a cliffhanger because Ashley was talking about what you're going to do, and I froze.
yeah. It's like it knows when it's your time to talk. So, so I'll go ahead and walk through really quickly a new update to the site. Would love for you all to take a look at it. It's something we've been wanting to do for a while. So let me go ahead and get my screen share started. Okay, so I think all of you on this have seen me demo already, so I won't go through everything unless you want me to. Let me know. I do private showings. But I want to talk a little bit about how we want to integrate the community that what we're working to build into the cases themselves. So we've been working on this specifically on the Karen Bodine case. So this is the case we're going to be piloting it with. This is the case that, a lot of the people that we're working with, like Andrea has been working on this case. We've been in contact with Carly, as well as some of the people who are supporting her as well. So one thing I want to draw your attention to then is if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you can see we now have a place for a community discussion. And this is where we're going to be creating a case discussion space in our community for every single case on our site. As long as we have a moderator for the space. So it's really important that we don't just willy-nilly throw discussions, up on cases. We know how we know what happens when there's no moderator, when there's no one keeping an eye on the conversation. But our goal for this space is to bring together a place for people to, ask questions, to work through some of these cases. But we know that with every case, there are always these really big questions or gaps or issues that need to be worked on. Why was this person at this place? It's like there are these little linchpins, and so we want to use these discussion areas to surface those and then bring them into the site itself. So here, I won't get into like the technical pieces. We worked very hard on this technically to make sure it looks good and it works good. But this is actually pulling directly from our community. So I'm going to switch over to the community here. There we go. So this should look familiar. So I think most of you are a part of the community. So you can see here, I'm in a private window, so I can see the public facing view. So we've got this case discussion and we've got Karen Bodine. So this is going to be visible to anybody, completely publicly available. So anyone will be able to see these questions and these conversations, but unless you become a part of the community, unless you sign in, put in your email address, put in a real name, you can't interact with this content. You can't add comments, you can't, like it or upvote it. So that's that. It feels small, but it's huge because we really see it as the way how we're gonna start tying these things together, and we're gonna bring these community conversations into the site itself in a really thoughtful and meaningful way. Again, with a moderator, with someone who's in charge of this case, keeping an eye on it and keeping, uplifting the great stuff and keeping the riffraff out. Cool. Any questions? Yeah.
I was just going to say, this is really cool too. What I like about it, I've been made the moderator of with the Melissa Witt case, but I haven't gotten that too far into that aspect yet. But this is a good example of what to see, because a lot of times the cases do have these these questions that are really, really important, but they don't get answered. And, this is unlike web sleuths, where it's just a plethora of questions and you're searching through the whole. This really keeps it so that main question, you can go to this one place for that discussion. So this is very encouraging and cool to see.
Yeah,
We also
that's our hope too. I mean, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll put a pin in mine and I'll come back. You go ahead.
No, you're good. Sorry, I think it's my delay's not showing up. But you're totally right. We want web sleuth is great because there's so much information, but we want that, we want that conversation. We want people actively engaged. But yeah, hopefully we can say, instead of having to dig, 30 pages deep into a web sleuth thread, which I'm sure we've all done, ideally that information is getting pulled back up. But I do think it's going to be different per case discussion, because Jacob, you might moderate, Melissa Witt's case in a way that someone would moderate a different case discussion, because cases are different and information is different. So I think we're really, really interested to see kind of how these patterns emerge.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that sounds really cool to me, because everyone's going to have, if you're a moderator, you're going to kind of have your different mindset and approach. So that will be fun to see how different questions that are being asked and discussions that are being prompted, and what the focus is with each case, and what questions are coming out. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. And then the intention is to be able, like Anna said, use this almost as a funnel of what's then happening in the community and in the digital workspace of what can we dig into? Can we do more research, dive into this deeper, because we're seeing this popping up a lot, but also an opportunity to dispel anything that we know is not fact. Because so often on these message boards, you'll hear the same thing reiterated that has been disproven, but then people just jump onto that or jump into a rabbit hole. So definitely working closely with the family where they can say, we know categorically this is not true. Do not spend time here. So being able to call that out. And for a lot of those cases, that is incredibly helpful, because we don't want inaccurate information out there. So tying it not only to the visualization, so if someone is coming in and passively kind of consuming this information, but then maybe they want to take the next stop and see what the conversation is, and then how they can engage that way, or what other questions they could ask. And then if they want to go even further. So we were intentional of building in these breadcrumbs so we can pull people in to show them that even the smallest thing is going to matter and is going to help these cases, but keeping these discussions alive, important on the correct topics, the stuff that's going to be helpful and not misinformation or just coming to share. A lot of times too, like, because some people will be like, well, Facebook has this too. Facebook does, but I mean, everyone's also trying to sell you something from their MLM or show you pictures of their vacation, so we want to remove that aspect as well and say, we are just focusing here on the case, because this is where the information is going to happen, and this will lead to the next opportunity.
I just wanted to make the comment that Facebook does have this, but a version of this, but it's unless it's case specific and that's all that's being talked about, then it's almost like people jot down their little thoughts and then they move on to the next case. It's not what I have talked about in the past, and that is really having a focused location for comments about a case to be hashed and rehashed, and people doing research saying, wait a minute, that's not really true, or that's not the right birth date, or whatever it is that comes up. So I think that that's what's really awesome here, is that it's connected to all of the structured work that you all have already done. And I just see a lot of productive, cool things coming out of this. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, thanks. That's awesome. That's a great thought. And Facebook is, I think Facebook is so important to the true crime community. I think it has given families platforms in a way that they never have before. I mean, I don't know about you. I am constantly hearing about people, Facebook messages, like Facebook tips, like cracking cases wide open. So I think it's like, we never necessarily, we don't want to replace Facebook. It should always exist. It should always be a really easily and accessible way. But you're totally right, Dana. We want to allow people to really focus. This is for someone who's new to the case can ideally, they scroll through this and they're up to speed and they kind of have a good sense of what's happening. They're, again, like you said, not asking the same questions, not rehashing the same theories. They're up to speed with everything.
Yeah, I really just wanted to pop in. I'm totally enjoying listening to like the whole conversation. But one thing that you were just saying, Anna, that I thought immediately too was like somebody like me who's coming into this, like I know enough about Karen's case that like these main points are things that like I've thought about extensively. But like if I'm someone who's coming into this case brand new with fresh eyes, and the first one about like, was her body placed there? Like right away, I have a point that I can say, okay, like I know nothing about this case, and now I have something to jump off of and research, and put my own perspective into it as well. So having like overarching themes in the beginning of the discussions too is super helpful for somebody who is just coming right into it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Cool. Well, take a look at this. If you guys have any other thoughts or any, gosh, it'd be great. I love those. You guys all hopefully can contact me at either in the community or you all have my email, but you do ever have those like, oh man, it'd be great if it had XYZ, and then when we get this really up and running, try it out, let us know what works, what can we make better, always wanting to improve. So definitely want your feedback. All right.
Guys, we've gone almost a half hour over. This was just so awesome. Love the conversation. I learned so much going right. Can I download that right away? And truly just the storytelling and just the thoughtfulness. I mean, Jacob, I definitely want to give you a round of applause for just sharing your insights, sharing your story, and being part of the community, and all of you for being here and being thoughtful and inquisitive and excited to use your talents in this way. I mean, we can't thank you enough. We never, in our wildest dreams from where we are, we were just kind of talking about this earlier today, how far we've come even in the last 6 months, but how far we can go and how much further we can go when we go together. So we're just really excited about that. So that said, thank you all so much for your time, for your interest, for your patience, for just being you and continuing on this journey and doing it together. So we have another one of these events scheduled for the 17th, and that's with Kate in our community. So Kate's a data analyst. She works in banking, but she does a lot on the dark web in her job. So she's picked up a lot of tips and tricks for like OSINT, so open source intelligence, of like, here's another really interesting tool. So it'll be a lot of tool focus and public databases and information. So jot that down, maybe invite someone, which would be great, just to kind of open them up and share this information. But other than that, we'll see you on the internet. How about that? Awesome.